Hello, everyone, wherever you are in the world. This is Edward James Tagg, and today is generally when I talk about spiritual and enlightenment theory or ideas. Today I'm a little bit late. Excuse me. So today I just wrote that title because I was talking to a student yesterday, and the title is "I Don't Exist." I do not exist. Now I'll explain that. It's basically what happens or what you go through when you have spiritual enlightenment. You don't have to follow on indefinitely with that idea of like I don't exist, although it can help, and it's very very important. But it usually happens in the beginning. Hello, and I'll say hello, Betsy, and everybody else who's joining in. So when you make a statement like I do not exist, it's actually the most accurate and the most beautiful statement you can make about yourself when you're having spiritual enlightenment. Or as actually, or I could say that it's the most accurate statement you can say about yourself in spiritual terms. And the biggest problem with spiritual enlightenment and these topics that we're talking about is they're full of paradoxes that sound like impossible conundrums. And I'm going to nitpick all those conundrums and solve all those impossible paradoxes and explain why it's very important. I don't know why, but this topic was getting really popular. Now, I also upload to YouTube, so bell notification, blah, 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 subscribe. You know the thing, right? So it comes down to real simplicities. If you want to get really, really, really simple, and even quantum physicists and non-duality teachers and spiritual enlightenment teachers will say that everything's an illusion. So this shirt, my glasses, he used to be a comedian called Morecambe and Wise and he used to do this. I used to really laugh. Anyway, in my glasses, everything, it's all just, if you look at matter, physical matter, there's a knocking sound, a knocking on the back of my hand. But quantum physicists, they say that if you can get small enough, like a little ant in a flying spacecraft, and you can fly through matter and through electrons and protons and neutrons and up particles and down particles and Z protons, particles and quarks and all these different things, that you'll discover that it's just lots and lots of empty space. You're just flying through empty space. So they're determined, as much as spiritual enlightenment teachers have determined, that matter is not real. And that people in science fiction get really excited about this concept of the multiverse, which also isn't real. It's there is potential for there to be multiple options within the universe to co-create or to re-exist in every moment, which is true. But beyond that, I'm getting complicated for people. I'm worried that my talk sounds complicated and I'm going to come back down to simplicity again. Simplicity. Well, if matter's not real, something in my teeth. If matter isn't real, well then what is real? Well, spirituality teaches us that God is real, or God is love. So those are the those are the early important spiritual statements you really need to make if you want to head into some form of spiritual awakening. Is that I do not exist because matter does not exist, and God is love, and and that's it. Those are those two. God is love, and I don't exist, because that's the only thing that's lasting. So that's the question about truth, like what is true. And so I was talking to my friend the other day, and I was saying that unfortunately in the New Age or the spiritual teachings, to make a statement like I do not exist is actually not very popular, and it's not very productive, and it's not very useful, because if you're if you're a business entrepreneur, or if you're a feminist, or if you're trying to empower women to create retreat centers, and if you're trying to get people to manifest and they've watched the movie The Secret, and they're all on board with ascension or portals or whatever, it would not be very productive for you to say, well, actually, you're not important, you don't exist. They go, oh. So that's why it's not important. That's why it's unproductive. So what I'm trying to say is that making the statement, I do not exist, is just not very now. It's not very trendy, and it's just not taught. For that reason, because, if you want to create a spiritual business and get people excited, you've got to kind of whip them up and empower them and give them hope. Now, it doesn't mean to say that if I wake up on any given morning and look outside at the clouds and have a conversation with my angels of God, and if I have a moment where I say, I do not exist, it doesn't mean that I'm going to feel really, really down about myself and I'm going to think, oh, I'm feeling sad because I have no existence and I'm not important anymore. Here's the funny thing, it actually does the opposite. And you say, well, that sounds crazy. Why would it do the opposite? Well, if you do not exist or I do not exist, then the only thing is God, and God is love. Well, then you jump out of your small ego and you jump into this God-love essence that's everywhere. So that's the only thing that's really, really why someone's calling me. I'll have to call them later. So you have to, then you jump into the realization that God is love, and when you're surrounded by love all the time, then you get filled up, and you find this Christ light in the center of your heart. So this is a really, really effective teaching tool. It's a painting of Jesus from the Catholic Church. Now, why the Catholic Church would actually do this is kind of beyond me, because it's a little bit risky for the Catholic Church, because it's telling the real truth. And if you understand this symbolism, you realize that God is love. So what Jesus is doing, Jesus is pointing inside to his heart in here, and then he's also pointing up with his other hand. So what Jesus is saying is that the only thing that's important, obviously because this is symbolism, this is everything he's presenting, is that inside his heart we all have this light, this Christ light if you like, and he's saying it's the same as what's up there, which is God. I mean, we always think God's up in the heavens, but it's just metaphoric, it's just symbolism. I mean, there are other forms of symbolism like the crown of thorns, which means his suffering, and then the flame on the top of the heart, which means this inner light, which cannot be extinguished. And then there's the cross, which you could say is the church, but more importantly, I think it's his self-sacrifice. It doesn't have to mean all of that pain, although it was painful for him. But he's saying, my self-sacrifice and suffering because I loved you, and I was an example of this inner light that is also belongs to God. So that's it's a really, really good teaching tool to look at that symbolism. If a lot of people understood it, that they all have the Holy Grail or the Christ light inside them, and they don't need to go to church, and that they do not actually exist in terms of matter, and the only thing that's important is God, well then the church would kind of be in trouble, because you wouldn't need to go to them anymore. So that's the absolute truth. And if you look at matter and time, if you went back 15 billion years or whenever it started, you'd realize that when God temporarily spread itself out across the cosmos and created souls and had this big bang, even though that was an event that happened, here's the other conundrum that's really, really hard to understand, is that because this world is an illusion, that's number one, because I do not exist, and the only thing is love. Well, love is the permanent state of the universe. So the universe, in reality, is also a manifestation of the creation from that love. So even the universe does not exist. And that's going to really get you in a bit of a nut, that's going to really throw you, is that the universe doesn't exist and you don't exist. And the only thing that exists is the origin behind all of that, which is love, which is God. So God is the only thing that has any permanence. The ancient Greeks talked about permanence all the time. They thought if it was temporary, if it rotted, even Jesus talks about moths and rust and things turning to dust, and those things are temporary, and it comes from the ancient Greeks. So love, which is not just like Hallmark card love, when you give someone a birthday card, not that type of pretty happy love. The real genuine power behind the creation of the universe, which is real universal love, is the only thing that's true. So although that Big Bang appeared to happen, and there did appear to be linear time, and then history, and then a cosmos, and then planets, all of that was happening was also an illusion. It was just like a game. It was like God with all this beauty and all this wonderment that was without time and without physical dimension. It was just a point of consciousness. It was just love. It was all powerful. I would say that love essence wanted to express itself. And that's what creation is. Creation is moulding the clay or playing with whatever you've got to play with and saying, hey, well, what can I do with this? Could I make a planet? Could I make a human being? Could I make a tree? Could I make a tiger? Or could I make a rabbit? So it's just creation has curiosity. It wants to express and manifest itself. So the origin of love wanted to express and see the limits or the unlimited potential of what it could be. It doesn't mean that God is sort of up there twiddling his thumbs and saying, oh, I'm bored, I don't know myself, I think I better do something with myself. It's not like that. God is not a person. God is essence. And the creation act is a beautiful act of expression and giving colour and giving vibration and giving expression to itself. So that's what happened. And although there was a universe that was created, it's more of a game, and it's more of a temporary thing, and it has a form of reality, but the reality is what you call relative reality. And relative means it's relative to the ultimate truth, and the ultimate truth is love, and all these relative truths sort of sit as subheadings under the ultimate truth. So you've got the ultimate truth that God is love, or just love is, and then you have relative truths which are subsets, and these subsets are like you and I. So we appear to have some type of existence, but it's temporary and it's not entirely real, because the only thing that's real is love. But then, having said that, in the picture that Jesus is teaching us is that each one of us has got this little light inside of us, so we all have a spark. So, or when God exploded and split itself up into little bits, we all have that spark. So that spark, that light, or the Christ light, or Holy Grail, that's in you. So when you're having spiritual enlightenment, if you want to have a aha moment, you can experiment with this. You can just say, well, I'm not physically here and my life is not important, but what is important is this light inside me, and it's permanent, and it belongs to the original spark of God. And so when you're walking around your shopping mall, it just really helps with your ego. When you're walking around a shopping mall, you don't make it about, me, like if I can buy the, nice eyeshadow today, I'm going to be really happy. Or when I talk to this person, what can I get out of this interaction? You just walk around with this light shining from your heart, and you put that forth as your number one goal, or you put that forth as your number one tenet of how you live your life. So, and it'll give you a tremendous amount of pleasure. When you operate from this, you actually end up benefiting. And everybody knows that when you're selfless and you think of others, that the benefits, the cost benefits down the road are that people smile and they appreciate you and you get more friends. So it's really kind of that simple. It doesn't mean that you're doing it. It doesn't mean that altruism means to do things without desire for benefit. That altruism has a selfish twist further down the line. It just means that when you walk around from love, it always works out for the best. So there was a wonderful movie called Eat, Pray, Love, and she went to see this witch doctor or spiritual teacher in Burma or wherever she was, and there was a picture of a man, and his head was cut off, and he had his head in his heart area, and he had arms and legs. I think he did. Yeah. So it was just an etching. It was a drawing, and it was trying to explain that when you walk throughout your world and you remove your head, which is your mind or your ego, and your head or your consciousness sits in your heart, then that benefits you tremendously. So the church doesn't really teach this, but they still let this painting slip through of Jesus teaching us that the spark of the light of the origin of God, which is up there, belongs inside of you, and everybody has that. And self-sacrifice is why he came to earth, to teach us this lesson. So now this is the important thing about your inner child. Is I just googled "I Don't Exist," and there was a song by Olivia O'Brien, and Olivia O'Brien was singing about the Hollywood friends that she used to have, and now her Hollywood friends, because they're so fake, they treat her like she doesn't exist. And you know, you could take a spiritual statement like "I don't exist," and you could become a nihilist, nihilist, nihilism, which comes from zero or nothing. You could get really down in the dumps about that, or you can be a punk or a goth, or just or a real emo millennial or whatever, excuse all the judgments, and you could just say, well, if I don't exist, what's the point of living? And that sounds very, very negative. And to say I don't exist is not a nihilistic statement. Thank you, Sheree. So your inner child has to be happy first. So that's, but this is my sad inner child from my foster home. So it's very important to understand that it would be unwise to make the statement "I don't exist" while you had a sad inner child. That'd be a really, really bad statement. Like Olivia O'Brien, who's singing that song called "I Don't Exist." She's feeling really down in the dumps because her Hollywood friends are ignoring her, and they're so shallow. And she's starting to have the beginning of a spiritual epiphany. I mean, I don't know who Olivia O'Brien is. She's a singer, probably somewhere in California. And she's singing about the meaningless, shallow lives of her Hollywood friends and how they're rejecting her almost as if she doesn't exist. And that's actually a really, really good thing for Olivia O'Brien, because she's having the beginning of an epiphany. And the epiphany is that the shallow ego is not benefiting her friends, and it's not benefiting her. So that's really, really good. So once you bring love into the equation, that statement of truth, God is love, and then you focus all your energy on the love or the original spark inside your heart, then you get filled up. And then your wounded, sad inner child, you tell him or you tell her that inside your heart a spark of God dwells, and then you realize that the ultimate truth is that you are part of God. And then the next final statement, this is the one that's a bit of a problem for the ego as well. The next final statement is "I am God." So you go from making the statement "I don't exist," and you go through a logical sequence of spiritual truths to get to the final statement where you say "I am God." Now here's the problem. If you use your little ego, if your inner child is not healed, and your inner child wants to feel important, and your inner child has been to some empowerment or new age talk and told that these are your rights, you can have whatever you want, you can manifest abundance, you can be whatever you want, then of course it's very easy to take that statement and say "I am God," but it will attach not to your heart, Christ-like, it'll attach to your brain, and it'll attach to your ego, and it'll attach to your false self. So that's very important. When you make the statement "I am God," you have to be having your vibration so incredibly high that you're just in God consciousness. So when you're in God consciousness, your lower ego falls away, and obviously your inner child, the wounded inner child that was in that lower ego, it gets transformed through love, and it projects and jumps up into this Christ consciousness. So that's hugely important. So you go from I don't exist to God is love, and then therefore, if God belongs to everything, if God's in the pussycat down the road, I've been feeding the neighbour's rabbits, and if the rabbits are cute, they jump up on the wires and they say, oh, there's some more carrots and apples coming. So if God is in the baby rabbits, or if God is in the tree and God's everywhere, well, God must be in me. And if God's in me, as long as I've got my ego in check, well, then I'm part of God. And the church wouldn't like to teach that, and a lot of teachings wouldn't like to teach that, because everybody would just be running around just saying, "Oh, I'm a pretty cool, shit hot kind of guy. I'm God." But it's not that. All of your ego and all of your descriptions, and you're ascended to a really, really high level, the same level that Jesus was teaching, or Buddha, or Zoroaster, or whoever else, spiritual teacher was teaching that. So when you're in a really highly vibrational ascended state, you can exist in a state of seeing everything as God, which includes you. So I don't exist, God is love, therefore I must be God, but only in my ascended state, where my lower ego, which is false and doesn't exist, that's the part that doesn't exist. Because when I made the statement, I don't exist, I don't mean everything, because the love spark that Jesus is teaching definitely exists. This is the part that exists. His hair doesn't exist, his arm doesn't exist, his clothing doesn't exist, his clothes and his arm. I mean, Jesus' hand got chopped off by a Roman soldier and now exists in a vault underground in Denmark, which is a surprising truth that nobody knows. Not many people do. So his hand has rotted and has become damaged by a Roman soldier. So it's lost its the light is the only thing that ever carried forth after his resurrection. Anyway, I'm getting into distractions. So it doesn't mean a nihilistic sort of empty, I don't exist. It doesn't mean that at all. It means that when your vibration's super high, you literally realize that you're part of God. Now, I suppose the only teachers that really talk about this vaguely would be the non-duality teachers, and I've looked at some of the non-duality teachers online, and a few of them are reptilians. A couple will be humans. I've met Gangaji myself, and she's human. But I think I've seen a non-duality teacher online that might be a starseed. So when a non-duality teacher says, I don't exist or you don't exist, you have to be careful who you listen to, because it's the vibration that comes with that. If there's a huge loving vibration and they're a starseed, well then whammo, you're onto a winner. Like Krishnamurti. Krishnamurti is an Indian spiritual teacher. I think he's dead. He might be alive. He used to talk to Rupert Sheldrake, an English physicist. And Krishnamurti is a Palladian starseed. So if you listen to any of his talks, and he ever makes any statements and saying, that the matter, or we're impermanent, or we don't exist, then you're getting it from a good source. But there are some teachers that are reptilians, and they're just cold and blank, and they're doing it for power and control and ego. And if you listen to a non-duality teacher who's a reptilian, you're just going to get mind control, and you're going to get sucked into their game. And they'll have some agenda, and they'll be teaching that for some adulation, or they want followers, or they want your energy. Now, if you have a non-duality teacher who's a human, and they're not a baby soul, but they might be a young soul, they might be teaching it for status, because they're in spiritual ego and they like adulation and status. So if you learn non-duality from a human teacher, and they teach that you don't exist and God is love, they'll be doing that for some status. So be careful who you listen to when you hear these types of spiritual statements. It's very, very, very important that you hear it from the right source. And it doesn't mean that the information is wrong. It just means the energy and the vibration behind that statement will have a genuine agenda of just teaching love, or it'll have a hidden agenda of manipulating and stealing your energy, or another hidden agenda of just them gaining status. So I'm sure you understand exactly everything I'm talking about. The New Age movement wouldn't teach I don't exist as a statement too often, and the reason they wouldn't teach it is because it's not very marketable, it's not very profitable, and it's not very popular. Because even this talk right now that I'm giving, that's going to end up on YouTube, I can guarantee that this particular talk will get the lowest ratings or the lowest number of people listening to this. Because who wants to listen to a talk with a statement, "I don't exist"? It's, just going to perpetuate and, give you a down feeling day. And, why would anybody want to listen to a talk like this? Because no one's going to grasp it unless their vibration's super high and they understand some of the spiritual truths or the statements about the truth of, epistemology and knowledge and reality and what is real in terms of quantum physics or science or philosophy or whatever. So just understand that it's not going to make you popular. It's not going to put bums on seats in your retreat centres. It's not going to make you lots of money. It's not going to give you status. It's not going to do much for you at all, really, unless you want to raise your vibration really, really high and feel love dwelling inside. And then if you wake up in the morning and you make the statement, "I don't exist," you're just telling your wounded inner child that all of your fears that you used to have in your wounded inner child, you can rest. You can take a holiday because God's got it under control. God is everything. God is all-powerful. And even when I hear myself saying those words, it sounds like that old-time religion, you're not important, God is everything, God's up there in the clouds controlling everything. But it's not that. So when I say that God is everything, don't get really uptight and start biting your fingernails and saying, "Oh no, here's another reason for me to feel that I'm not important and God's all powerful." It's not that. God is not in person. God does not have an agenda. God does not want you to feel any way less in any way. It's important to understand that this God I'm talking about is the essence behind the universe. It's total powerful love. When you dwell in it, you're just crying and dancing around like a lunatic, just full of love, like you've just been married, or you've just had all your birthdays or your Christmases all come at once. You just feel wrapped up and full and expanded and connected and meaningful and purposeful and beyond time and space. It's huge. It's really huge. You'll flip out if you have that realization. And then all of your wounded inner child and all of your insecurities, they're just like leaves on a tree. They just fall away and blow away. They're just insignificant because you're centered in the power that created the entire universe. Thank you for this talk. I do feel like this all the time. I'm always saying I'm just compared to the next person. That's interesting what Paige has said. Thank you, Paige. That's interesting. I'd love to talk to you about that one day. Okay, so this also goes on YouTube. If people love my talks, continue to watch. Don't worry when I give really strange topics that are hard to understand. I will always resolve them. I know there are spiritual conundrums that seem frustrating, but God is love, and that's the ultimate truth. And as a subset, you could say that technically speaking, in terms of physical matter or existence, that rusts or rots on the ground, you don't actually exist. Not really. Not really, really, really. But there are subsets of lesser truths, relative truths, that temporarily exist. And so you, in your physical body, sitting here right now, are a lesser subset of a relative truth. But the ultimate truth, which is love, divine love, when you dwell in that, you'll just be dancing around like a lunatic, singing songs all day and not getting anything practically done. But I hope that helps someone. My talks can sometimes be weird. I apologise. I haven't drunk much of my tea. I don't, because when I talk, I just talk non-stop. If that helps you, fine. If it's a total confusion, feels like some whack job is just lunatic is just explaining the universe and talking in riddles, well, you can ask me if you want to. Yes. So I'll say goodbye, and I hope that helps you. Hope that helps someone. Hope it helps you. Yes, enough said. Bye for now. Bless you.